Hello and welcome to another episode of What's Bugging You. I'm your host, Chesley Elkins, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Brian Victor, and we have a special guest here with us today. Before we introduce him, let's hear a word from our sponsor.
Preventive Pest Control. Taking care of the pests you see and the ones you don't see. Preventive Pest Control. It's as simple as that.
So today we have Mr. Allan Foyer with us. We're actually excited to have him here with us today. He has a tremendous impact on our careers. He's helped us a ton, and he's very well known in the industry, not just locally but statewide and in across the country. 36 years you've been doing pest control, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I started in spring of 1989 right out of the Marines, and that's what I've done ever since. And
as well as you sit on several national boards and committees. You do a lot with termite work and wood destroying pests across the country, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's at least on the intellectual side. So what I did several years back, I was the chairman of the Wood Destroying Organism Committee for the National Pest Management Association.
Which means termites and other...
Yeah. Things we'll be talking about today, I believe. And then what I'm currently doing, I sit on the Certification and Testing Committee for the Entomological Society of America, which is kind of the certification board for entomologists, both at the non-degreed level, which is where we find ourselves, and then people that would have degrees in everywhere from a bachelor's in entomology all the way up to a doctorate in entomology. So yeah.
And you actually taught some courses at Purdue, right? Correct?
Yeah. So I've been invited to teach at Purdue University. They have a pest management conference. They have a tremendously cool entomological department at Purdue. Purdue actually generates and creates some of the coolest literature that we have as an industry. I call it the Bible, if you will. It's called the Truman's Guide, which means very little to the listeners, but it means a lot to our industry. And so that generates out of Purdue University. So they have the pest conference every January, which I have always been afraid to go to because of the weather. Indiana in January is never a lot of fun, and one time it was easy. Last year I got stuck in the snow, so made for an interesting journey back home.
I remember you telling me once when you started your own company in pest control, you wanted to focus on termites. Why was the reason you wanted to focus on termites?
Well, mostly because I'm lazy and not that smart, I think, And what I really mean by that is if you focus on one thing, you can get really good at it, because when you try to handle a lot of different things, you kind of lose focus, right? So I really just want to specialize in that. And also that's what I did for the last 5 of my 7 years with the first company. That's really all I did was termite control. So you might as well do something you know very, very well.
I'm calling BS on the lazy and not that smart. But,
yeah.
So why are termites such a pest? Why is that something that we're so concerned about?
Well, yeah. So if we think about pests, and I think about 3 categories of pests that I think we always ought to control. Those that cause damage, those that cause disease, and those that cause significant discomfort. So obviously with termites, we're thinking about damage. And so they damage our assets, whether it's a commercial building or a residence, a home residence, which we would often say is the largest investment people might make in their life, most people. And they also can damage other things that would be maybe less thought about, such as goods, paper and cardboard and wood goods, or even like fences and things like that. So in the big picture, they're good for the environment because they're recyclers. I mean, that's their main role. And then we do silly things which often invite termites into our lives, and they just do what they do.
And speaking of damage, as probably most people want to hear today is what damage does it cause to the homes, and what do they notice if someone has it? What's there to be concerned about, and what are they notice?
Yeah, so the best we can describe with words, since we don't have any graphics with us today, is basically we see a lot of damage to drywall, sheetrock. So our white walls will often get kind of silly looking. It'll get wavy or egg-shelled, and to the touch, it kind of sounds hollow, or the paint and the texture gives way, and you'll see some brown staining where would normally be white gypsum. We can see the same thing on framing. We could also see the same thing on baseboards. So those are the most typical evidences of termite damage that we see in residences in our area.
And I think the reason they see that, right, correct me if I'm wrong, is because they're eating the cellulose on the drywall away from the paint, so the paint will sit there without the paper behind it, and it'll kind of flake away, right?
Exactly, yeah. The typical drywall is going to be, gypsum, which is just a mineral. It's got no nutritional value. On the outside of that is going to be texture and paint. There may be some nutritional value, but really they take that thin veneer of paper that holds the whole thing together, Very superficial damage, but it's a great tip for us to say, hey, something's going on. Now's the time to intervene and stop the termite issue.
We'll get phone calls because people say it's my paint's chipping and there's like mud in it or dirt in it. Maybe you can explain why you see mud and dirt in it. So.
That's a great question, Brian. Thanks for that one. Because I think a lot of people misunderstand that. So that's called termite mud tunneling or mud tubing. And what happens with the termites? They live in the ground. So the termites that do the majority of the damage that we see in New Mexico, we'll talk about another termite in a few minutes here, but they live in the earth. And what they do is they commute up into our homes or whatever they're feeding upon. Well, they have to retain moisture in the earth. So they live in almost a 100% humid environment. They're very soft-bodied. They don't have the ability to retain moisture as a hard-skinned insect necessarily would. They have to be a little bit more flexible to fit through things. So what they do is they take mud from the earth and they combine it with saliva and fecal material, and they patch it together. And I like to call it like termite adobe, which makes a lot of sense here in New Mexico. It's basically held together, and they create a shelter tube, and they move inside the tunnel, and that maintains humidity and gives them a pathway. It's like their road. This is the way to get from here to there. And then the last thing it does, it protects them from predation, which would principally be ants. So there's a reason they build that. You'll never see subterranean termites, which is the primary termite once again, coming up into a structure without that mud tube represented and visible for us as either professionals or even the layperson.
Any health concerns associated with termites?
Not really. So when I teach classes, whether it's for the real estate commission or for our industry, I'll bring live termites and things like that, and they're clinically clean, right? They're not known to vector any diseases or anything like that. So tongue in cheek, probably the only health concern you have is if they eat enough of your house, you'll fall through something. But that's never happened to my knowledge here.
I saw an episode of House one time where there was some termites creating a lot of methane gas that caused somebody to have something. Is that a pretty far-fetched?
Well, House is a TV show,
Right.
So, they do create methane, but methane is created by just all kinds of decomposition. I will tell you with the methane, when they get into a home, specifically when there's like a little bit of a moisture problem and they're in an enclosed area like a closet or something like that, I can smell them. Not all the time, but if I go into an enclosed space with not a lot of air movement and there's been a moisture, you can smell kind of that dank, musty smell. And I'm usually not wrong. Some of that's the methane, some of it's just the moisture and the decomposition from that.
So it might be accurate to say that the moisture that's drawing them into the house is probably more of a health concern than the termites themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to do with a lot of biological things. When we look at loss of our structural value of our homes, termites is one thing, and not to go too far afield on the commentary here, but we actually lose more of our structures to decay fungi, where the wood's just falling apart, and that's all driven by moisture. Even here in considerably dry New Mexico, we do silly things with our water. We don't let it drain from our home. We have a leaky pipe we don't fix fast enough. So I think you're absolutely right. That exposure to those fungal spores, the mycotoxins that are found within that is going to be more of a concern even than the termites health-wise.
Another thing, we get a lot of phone calls in the springtime, and it always reminds me of you because all of a sudden we'll get a text from you like, "Oh, it's a rainy day. Expect some swarmers tomorrow." And maybe you could elaborate on that more.
Right? Yeah, that's cool because that's something. Typically around Valentine's Day, if we get precipitation, so rain or a light snow, and then the forecast says we're going to have kind of a spring-like day, like high 50s or low 60s. That's the things we look for them to cast off their mating swarms.
Like triggers them to...
Yeah, triggers them, yeah. That's scientifically known. So precipitation, followed up then by a spring-like day, and usually we start to see them about 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and you just see them kind of fluttering through the air, and it's just a normal event. So again, we start looking for them around Valentine's Day. That can be delayed into the season if we don't have that precipitation. So say we don't have rain until March or April, it can push back as well. But usually that's the scene. Then we oftentimes, to make a connection to what we do with Balloon Fiesta, we often get a secondary swarm in the fall. Same rules apply. We get a rainstorm just to screw up Balloon Fiesta, and then we get a nice, beautiful day, 70 degrees, and they launch off again.
So if you see those, doesn't necessarily mean you have termites, right?
Well, it depends. If they pour out in the interior parts of your home, there's a good chance there's a colony beneath your home. If you see them flying around on the outside of your home, you may not have any problems at all, and they're just doing their part they're just propagating reproductives as a natural part of their biological process because they're everywhere. Here's the thing: every acre of land in New Mexico is suspect to having termites. I wouldn't say every acre does, but almost every acre that's flat and arable land is going to have some termite presence because that's what they're supposed to do.
So what parts of the country the nation. Do we see the highest termite pressures, and then how does New Mexico compare to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, intuitively, wet and warm is going to have a lot of termites. So think about the Gulf Coast states, Dixie, if you will. The termites down there take no prisoners. There's an adage in the industry, and it doesn't hold true to New Mexico, so don't quote me here in New Mexico, but you get down in the southern states and in the Gulf Coast, there's two types of houses, those who have termites and those are going to get them. Or maybe the word was had termites and it's been mitigated. It's kind of a known expectation. You're planning termites from the day you build the house till the day the termites or the bulldozer knocks the house down.
And I know those type of termites, I believe they're called Formosan termites, right?
Formosan
termites.
Yeah.
And we're never, it's not like, the Africanized bee that's going to get here, right? It's they'll never be here in this New Mexico.
Never count the bugs out, Brian. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they don't read the books. I would say the likelihood of them coming up into New Mexico is pretty low. I wouldn't discount the lower Rio Grande Valley, Doña Ana County, Las Cruces, Mesilla. They might make it up here. Maybe the winters are too harsh, but man, the bugs will find a way, man, just like Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I've seen lots of pictures and videos of those things. They do major damage. Like ours will damage some drywall, but those ones.
No, ours will do significant damage too, given time. And again, we have different species. I mean, we're going to use a general term, subterranean termites. But even here in the greater Albuquerque area, we'll probably have 4 or 5 different species, all in the genera Reticulotermis, a big $1,000 word right there. But certain species, like the eastern subterranean termite, has a much more voracious appetite, and those are the ones in certain pockets of the town. And you guys know, we've talked about them, where we kind of gets the hair on the back of our head standing up. And then we have other ones which can be kind of the arid land termite. That's a more native one. They're a little lazier. But yeah, the Formosan termites, the Coptotermis, a whole different genera, was brought in after World War II into the Gulf Coast, like Mobile, Alabama, New Orleans, Louisiana, and they've spread all the way up to Tennessee. And Tennessee's got some pretty cold winters too, so that's why I'm saying I don't count the bugs out. And they're actually into East Texas now. So I think they'll be here eventually. Maybe not in my lifetime, but they may make it up here.
Well, we always like to offer homeowners a lot of tips for do-it-yourself and things that they can do to keep their house pest-free. When it comes to termites, what can our homeowners do themselves?
Okay, well, I'll start off by saying is termite control is not a homeowner's job. Okay, so once you know you have a termite problem, that you engage a licensed and competent professional, and you vet them out, figure out who you're talking to, and make sure you're comfortable. But what homeowners can do for avoidance is a couple of simple things around their house. The most direct thing that I tell folks to do at their home, do not have any sort of wood to soil contact. So if you've got wood structural members and they touch the earth in any way, don't. Figure out a way to fix that. I'm talking about a post at your patio, your deck, more importantly, your wooden siding, or if you've got a subfloor, a crawl space area, make sure your joists and your pier posts are not touching the earth, because that just invites them in and they will take every advantage they can. Associated with that, again, is moisture. They are highly moisture dependent, being a soft-bodied insect. I mean, they find enough of their own moisture in the ground, but if we add moisture into their environment through natural or artificial means, so if we have a leaky pipe, we vent our dryer into our crawl space and not outside, so we're adding humidity into the crawl space. That can be a concern. But usually what happens is we have the water drop around the outside of the home, right off the edge of the pitched roof or at the canales on a flat roof, and then that water is not encouraged to rapidly drain away from the home. Those are the 2 big things that homeowners can do. And
as a homeowner, we're all homeowners here. What are some things I know we had some tips of how to avoid it. What are some things to watch for? We talked about the paint. Is there anything else we should maybe be aware of? If we usually find them, I guess, in real estate inspections, right? Is it required to have a real estate when you sell it?
The only time you're required to have an inspection during a real estate transaction is if it's going to be a government guaranteed loan, typically VA, but even FHA or HUD. That's the only time it's required. But you're foolish to not get an examination. Any real estate professional in the metropolitan area, even up to Santa Fe, they should be giving you a recommendation that you should get a wood pest examination, again, by a competent and licensed company.
Yeah, this is one thing it's not a cheap fix. It's it's going to cost some money. At the low end, $400 or $500. At the high end, $5,000.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I think you're being generous with $400 and $500. That was probably true about 6 or 7 years ago. Everything's gone up, as we know. The reality strikes us all. So the materials have gone up, labor's gone up, insurance has gone up. You guys know, because that's what you guys do.
I was just trying to be a little
right?
generous. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
No. Because I don't want to give people false hope. I would probably tell you if we come out and we've got to intervene on termite control, I think we're probably in the basement starting about 800, 900. And again, depends on how the house lays out and, how it was built and all that, the size of it. We've done $4,000 termite treatments on residences. I mean, that's an outlier. So 800 is, the bottom margin, 4,000 is the top margin. So I would say our average control for a typical 322 house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage in Greater Albuquerque is going to be $1,200 to $1,800. It's not an unreasonable amount. I think what I used to tell people, it's about a mortgage payment, And also what I want to tell people about termite control, don't think of it as something that's unsolvable. If you bring the right people in, think of it as house maintenance. Think about it as painting or, restuccoing or something like that, or re-roofing. It's something you expect to do and budget for as a homeowner, and don't like lose your mind. Like if you have to paint your house, it's not something you lose your mind over. It may not be something you're happy about spending money on, but it's part of owning a home. So I think termite control and pest control in general is that. It's not it shouldn't be thought of as a negative thing. It's house maintenance.
So if somebody orders a termite inspection or wood destroying insect inspection for their home, what can they expect, and what's the process like? Okay.
So I'll assume you mean during a real estate examination. So again, we always ask ourselves why we do anything. For real estate examinations, we're going to represent the buyer. The buyer's our client, as well as a real estate professional's client that day. And then what we do is our job is to be kind of their bloodhound. Our job is to go out there and do a thorough visual and manual examination of their house, outside, inside, underneath, and based upon the scope of the service, we may get up higher and higher levels depending on if that's what they want as well. So as for a plug, as far as services for preventive, we also offer what's called a critical pest assessment, which we go beyond wood pests and we start looking for critical pests. Again, damage, disease, discomfort. We look for rodents, we look for bird problems, parasites, things like that. These all can be bundled in. They're great. It's a great idea. Again, you're making this big investment and you're spending $100 to $200 on a pest inspection, and now you've got solid information. Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of people calling, not just for real estate, but homeowners themselves. Mm-hmm. They'll see damage and they need something. They want us to come by and check it out, and so you can
absolutely. And so when they see something weird, that's what when I train people on how to do wood pest examinations. I says you look for goofy stuff and then touch it, and then determine what it is. Obviously, the homeowner may not have that training; they probably don't. But what almost every homeowner has now is they've got a movie studio in their pocket. They can take really good, well lit, high focused, high def pictures, or they can take a little 5 to 15 second video and they can send it to somebody like me or you guys, right? And we can look at that stuff and go, this is certainly this, or it's certainly not this, or we don't know. We should perhaps come out and see what's going on. That's what we should do.
Yeah, this is a pest that I've noticed that won't go away. Sometimes customers will go to people's houses and they'll see the issue with their paint and they'll just like, I'll put some spackle on there and paint over it and that's going to solve the problem. No, that's not taking care of the termites.
Because all they did is they misunderstood. They just didn't have an understanding what was really going on. I mean, a quick story. This is like 30 years in the rearview mirror. Is in Rio Rancho where I lived, my first pest control company, and there was this family and the father was disciplining the kids for damaging the walls with their toys. And then we showed up and said, no, so that's termites. That had nothing to do with your kids. He was mortified. He was a real, very remorseful father because he thought his kids were being reckless. And so you don't know. People just don't know. And so that's the value of a podcast like this is we let people know this is what's going on. And again, we'll get some graphics post production, and people can actually see some of this, which will be really valuable to the listener. Well, to the viewer. The listener won't get anything other than we're describing here.
And sometimes I'll hear people discuss some termite damage, and the discussion comes up like trying to determine whether it's new damage or old damage. Mm-hmm. I know you have some thoughts about that.
Oh, that's vexing. I hate the words new and old. One of my colleagues said we need to almost throw that out of our vocabulary when it comes to termite control. What we would say is, has it been mitigated or not? Have steps been taken that we can prove that it's been solved? Like if I roll up onto someone's house and I see damage, is it old or new? It's irrelevant. If it's not been mitigated, we have to make the assumption, as Brian was saying before, they'll carry on. They're cryptic. That means hidden. They don't just come out and wave at you. I mean, the only time you really see live ones is during that swarming season. Once in a while on a new a new infestation. The worker termites really don't know the confines of their uniforms, where they're working, how far they can go, and they may be more on the surface, but that's pretty rare. So you don't really know, and there's no way to really use those adjectives to describe the situation. So you either mitigate it or you don't. And then I highly recommend that homeowners, once we do termite control, they repair that. Then we have a compare and contrast for the future, for what it's worth.
Well, speaking of mitigation, I know everyone's here in Albuquerque Breaking Bad fans, and they're used to Vamanos Pest Control, where they come and tint and take care of tint the whole house, with like a big circus tint over it, and that's how they take care of the termites. That's not how we do business. No one in Mexico does that, but tell us a little bit about the treatment and the mitigation for it.
So what Brian's talking about, just to give reference to his cultural icon there. When you put a bag over the house, or it's called a tarpaulin fumigation, you're basically pushing out the air, the oxygen, and the nitrogen, and you're putting in a different type of chemistry, which would asphyxiate everything underneath the bag. Now, that is a control measure for a different type of termite called Drywood termites. We'll come back to those guys in just a few minutes. They're here, but we do a lot less of that work. Okay. When we come back to our subterranean termites, again, they're in the ground. Our role as a pest management company, in cooperation with the homeowner's got to think about those conducive conditions, wood to soil contact and moisture. We counsel them on how to fix that stuff. Then we come in and we create chemical barriers in the earth. So we're going to inject termiticide material, that's just a pesticide, a chemistry, into the earth around and beneath the structure in areas that would have avenues of approach for the termites to come into the structure. So we'll go around the outside of the house, we'll dig trenches against the foundation where there's soil. If there's walkways and patios, we'll drill through those from 12 to 18 inches, depending on the material that we would use. We put about a half a gallon in each of those holes. We intoxicate the soil. If the termites would move into that, it would cause mortality, certainly to the termites that touched it, but with some of the newer technology, they move back towards the colony, and through touching and or cannibalization of their own dead, they actually pass the molecules through the colony and causing a massive colony disruption and even perhaps destruction. Inside the house, we often have to do additional work as well based upon the way the home is built. We may have to drill through concrete floors, or we may have to go into drywall and put a liquid foam material around plumbing penetrations and things like that. Any sort of gap or crack is how termites get in. They need about a 32nd of an inch. If you guys want to picture that in your mind, put a dime on edge, that's a 32nd of an inch. So they can come through a settlement crack. They can certainly come through planned expansion joints in the structure. They can come behind stucco and certainly up around pipe apertures and things like that. So that's typically what we do. If it's a crawl space home, we've got to go in the crawl space to inspect it and make the right applications based upon what the reality tells us once we're down there. It all starts with an inspection, so we understand. We educate the homeowner what's going to happen, then we execute the job.
And is it pretty typical to have to replace and repair a lot of the framing after mitigating the termites?
Another one of those, it depends. I mean, we just have to look at it. And here's the thing, we never make those calls, right? That's something we the best thing we can ever do, again, loving the cameras in our phones or the videos, customers ask me how bad it is, and you'll see a picture of my blade right through a joist or through a pier post or whatever, or through a sill plate, and going, how bad is it? Well, it's that bad. So that's something they would have to work with a licensed and competent contractor to make those choices. Most of the time it's superficial, but not always. And remember what we see on drywall. Drywall has no bearing on the structural value of the home, truly superficial. It's a nice thing to look at, but it's the stud work and the framework behind there. And we don't really know unless we take the drywall down. So I never want people to have I don't want them to think way too much of the termites. I also don't want them to think too little of the termites. I think it's basically having that balanced approach. And as they say, it is what it is. And every situation is different. Biology and nature are variable, and they have certain traits and certain consistencies. But each house, you can have one house here, and then the house next door is got a whole different situation, both on what the solution is or the termite activity and damage.
Now, you mentioned another type of termite where they do actually come in tent in some places.
Right.
You're talking about the Drywood termite.
Yeah,
correct?
Drywood termites, and that's exactly what the name implies. So again, those are a couple of families that are all still termites. They just have a different behavior. So they have no requirement or desire to have ground contact. So they actually live in the wood that they're infesting and feed upon. So their entire lifestyle or life cycle occurs in the wood that they're eating. So that makes it interesting. So it's sort of limited. There's a smaller colony. However, they're harder to find, and they can be in, again, cryptic, tough locations that's hard to get to. So if we think about a typical ceiling up to the roof, we'll call that the roof package, the trusses and what might be up there, the decking. There's several layers, and that's what makes those termites challenging. So if we see them on a piece of lumber, say it's an outside portal post or a windowsill, we can drill into the galleries because, again, they're in that wood. We hit them with a foam. The foam spreads out and intoxicates the colony. And that's a pretty simple way to go. Once they get into the layers of the structure, that's where the challenge happens, and that's when we would consider prescribing and deploying a fumigation.
And what other wood-destroying animals or insects are we concerned about when you do a examination for real estate?
Okay, so earlier I alluded to decay rot fungi, right? So people will call it dry rot. That's a misnomer, but I'm not going to give that class today. So what happens is if wood continually gets moist, fungal spores get on it, and they start to degrade the wood. And again, just a natural process of decomposition. Okay, we've seen this on railroad ties. We've seen it on fallen trees, on nature walks in the valley or up in the mountains, where the wood just gets darker and starts breaking across the grain and looks all brittle. We'll see it on the edge of decks. We'll see it on the underside of eaves and stuff like that. I pause on that one because it's not an insect, but we still have a biological event going on where we're losing structural value. This goes back again to water management. And so that's easy to stop. You stop the water, you don't need to apply any poisons or pesticides or fungicides for that stuff. Okay, so now let's move back onto the bugs. One of my favorite bugs to consider, or group of bugs, is wood infesting and wood destroying beetles. Okay, and these beetles will range from beetles that damage ornamental trees that are not doing that well, whether they may be a live tree but sick or a fallen tree. Again, they're just recyclers. They live in the wood. They put their larvae in there, which is the little maggoty-looking juvenile beetles, and those beetles feed upon the starches and then the actual wood fibers that would make up the cell walls of the wood. And again, they're naturally decomposing things. But if we've got a damp situation, and what we typically see is in crawl space homes, so the valley is an area that's highly susceptible to wood infesting beetles, they will obliterate a subfloor to a higher degree than termites even. So it's something you can't just think about termites. And this, again, going back to employing a licensed, knowledgeable, and competent pest professional, is they understand that. They understand there's a broad spectrum of organisms that can be causing the damage to the home.
Yeah, we've had homes in the past where another company misidentified, a beetle as a termite, and they paid thousands of dollars to get termite treatment, and nothing happened. That's
unfortunately true. Yeah, it's kind of you talked about house. It's kind of malpractice, right? This is misdiagnosis, misprescribed, and then of course everything that was done won't solve that problem. So again, we as an industry have to understand that. And again, where did this start off? We talked about Purdue University. We talked about the Truman's Guide. All this information is available to everybody in our industry. I teach for the industry. You guys, that's how I got my job with Preventive 13 years ago. I auditioned teaching for the trade association. I think that's what you told me, something like that. But
you just came in and said, "I'm working here."
Exactly. Well, So the bottom line though is we have to understand this stuff. I mean, if we're the bloody professionals, then we have to know what we're talking about. And I just taught in Ohio, Michigan. A couple weeks earlier, I taught at the Workforce Training Center for C&M, north side of the city, and I taught specifically on beetles for 2 hours. And I said, guys, you have this information. So some companies don't value knowledge and education, and that's a travesty. I mean, I think if you're a professional, whether you're an HVAC guy or an electrician or plumber, brain surgeon or pest control guy, you should know what you're talking about. And things are always evolving. The control materials change. I think the biology doesn't change much, but certainly the environment changes. Okay, as homes age, in a neighborhood, a house is always one day older. Well, eventually houses are 70 and 80 and 90 years old, and then the water flow. We have to look. All these variables come into play, and we just have to go out there and do that inspection, and then apply our sensibilities, our training, our experience, some of the literature, the book knowledge, and then come to a solution.
Well, we're kind of going to get a little long on time here, but I would like to. We have a couple of questions that listeners emailed in, and I don't know if you want to take those there, Chesley.
So Yeah, one of the questions we got for today, what are the most beneficial bugs to have in your garden, and how do you attract them?
All right. Well, so the word beneficial is a little that's the tricky word for me. I think there's awesome bugs to have in your garden. They may not be necessarily beneficial, but they're super cool. I think it's cool to have pollinators. Those are my favorite ones. And all you do is have plants that flower and have a lot of nectar. They're succulent. And I love to have all the bees come in and the butterflies. I love that. And you can amp that up by making sure your plants are well watered. So that's almost kind of a tug of war in New Mexico. Like, we often want xeriscape plants, but if you have plants that are really brilliantly bright, they have bright flowers, purple. They can't resist purple. It just glows like a neon sign during the day. That's one of the best ways to do it. And the plants you can smell. If you can smell them, the bugs can smell them. That's what I would say.
And we have another one. It's a very kind of a difficult question to answer, I guess, is how do you get grasshoppers away from your garden?
I think the only way to really keep them away from your garden is mechanical exclusion. So setting up some sort of a wire meshing thing, almost the reverse idea of a catio. Like, you would often create a thing so your cats can go outside but be safe and not run away. You do the same thing, but you have to bring your mesh down to about 1/4 inch and seal it off. That's probably the best way. We also know that the grasshoppers are pretty cyclical. We don't see them every year, and we don't see them to the same degree every year. So really, it's mechanical exclusion. If we're looking for chemistry, I have nothing to offer.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Allan, and answering lots of questions about termites and other things. We appreciate everything you do to educate people both in the industry and the real estate industry that we work closely with, and to raise the level of performance and competence for all people involved in these things.
Yep. Pest control for the listeners, the viewers, man, it's a great career. If you're interested, find a pest control company near you, and it's a great job for a young person, man or woman. Take the lessons that they give you, do the reading they give you, and I had a great 36-year career. I'm really not done. I've just kind of retired to something else, so I'm doing a lot of traveling and trainings, which is...
You're retired to doing podcasts with us.
Yeah, this is one of many I've done, but it's fantastic, and you guys were such a great company to be with, and I'm still, still an ally, That's what
we've been very blessed and very lucky to have you with us, and you can see your passion for it and your expertise and knowledge, and it's rubbed off and trickled down through, not quite to your level, but to many of our employees, and it's like... you're amazing, so we appreciate you. We could bring you on any subject here and talk for hours, probably.
Maybe we'll do something else, but it's been a real pleasure. But pest control's, it's fun. You get to meet neat people out there. I love going into people's houses and meeting them. Most of the time, once in a while, you get an old fuddy-duddy that's hard to deal with, but most of the time, people are cool. And you're there. Now you're going
to be an old fuddy-duddy.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I told my wife if I turned into an old crank, she should just shoot me. But we'll see what happens there. But the bottom line, though, is most people are fine people, and we sometimes meet them on one of their worst days, right? Like, they don't know, and our job is to bring them down. And then once you're there, and you let them know we're going to help you, and our prices are fair. We're not gonna take advantage of your dismay. It's great. And, because you guys all started in the field too, right? So what that feels like, right? And it's a blast. And I think that's what makes Preventive great. And if you're pat ourselves on the back, all of our managers started in the field as technicians. And it's not like we just pulled some guy he went to management school or something like that. We figured it out as we went along, man. It's cool stuff.
Well, again, Allan, we thank you so much, and we invite, if any listeners out there have any questions, go ahead and feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to answer them and help you out the best we can.
Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.